Why does your brain favor shortcuts? Well, the easiest thing is we're animals. It's hard to believe it, but we are animals. So our brain is specifically wired to one, use the least amount of brain power, two, use the least amount of energy. Otherwise, could be known as the path of least effort, and then also remove us from danger. So, one of the things that I think is important to point out when you're talking about the mind is why do people not like public speaking? Public speaking, like a huge phobia. Everybody has this public speaking phobia. Well, one of the reasons that people don't like public speaking is you literally put yourself in danger. You think about it, you're next to many different otherwise known as apex predators, and you're typically out in the open. There's nowhere to hide. You are stranded in that area. You're vulnerable. That's not a situation that your body typically likes, given that it's dangerous. Well, switching to this slide talks about switching your mindset because your brain thinks everything is scarce. It's like, okay, well, we only have a certain amount of energy, so we've got to sleep, we've got to do this. We can't exert extra energy. But really, we live in a plentiful world. We've never had this much resources just devoted towards food, entertainment, AI, data centers, energy, all of space travel. All of that is incredible. And everybody's standard of life has increased. I don't know how many folds, but a lot. And that leads to you being in this plentiful environment. There's plentiful opportunities, there's plentiful amount of resources. There's enough for you, your friends, and everybody else. So if you switch from this scarcity mindset, from this plentiful mindset, that does make it easier. But then there's still other cognitive biases that you've got to think about. And so I would say the cores are the principle of least effort, present bias, and outcome bias. So the principle of least effort was coined by George Zip. And George Zip had a paper. He was a Harvard linguist professor. And in that paper, he talked about the study of words and the words that people use consistently. And why do words come up so often and as frequently and in a normalized frequency distribution? The most common word is the, and then the second most common word is of. And the and accounts for the same amount of frequency as the at half. Since it's the second most frequent word, it's not close to it's the close to half of the occurrence of the. And he's like, what? That's kind of weird. Wouldn't you think that they would use some kind of rank order instead of this weird distribution that I'm getting? And so after thinking about it and studying it, he came up with this principle of least effort. And people like to do things that took the least amount of effort. And when they're talking about communicating, they wanted a broad vocabulary, but they didn't want to have to use so many words. So they had words that occur more often than you would think. And then the words that weren't occurring very often were normalized against the most often word, which was weird. But that applies to not only words, but populations in cities. The the city that is the most populous in each state or country typically is double than the most other populous city, the second one. And this story continues on and on, where there's many examples of this. There's income distribution, traffic, website traffic, income distribution. The top earner typically makes double than that the second top earner, and vice versa. You keep going down the wrong.